The high cost of living promises to be top of mind for voters in the June 2nd primary, especially when it comes to gas prices. Right now, regular gas averaging $6.16, diesel at $7.49, according to AAA. While the Strait of Hormuz conflict has pushed prices higher, California still pays much more than the national average. Why is that? Well, higher taxes and environmental fees more than double the national average. An April CBS News YouGov poll shows 57% of Californians believe the state's environmental policies aren't worth the added cost at the pump. Now there is growing momentum to suspend the gas tax, not just from Republicans, but some Democrats too. But what would happen if we got rid of it? I talked with Frank Jimenez from California's nonpartisan legislative analyst office. He says the gas tax brings in roughly $8 billion a year and explained where that money goes and what suspending it would really mean.
So revenues from the state's gasoline excise tax are used to support state and local transportation projects. Roughly 2/3 of that remains at the state level to support highway maintenance and rehabilitation. And the remaining 1/3 is provided to cities and counties on a formula basis to support their local streets and roads.
So how and why has California's gas tax more than doubled over the past decade?
So the state's gasoline excise tax has increased over the past decade due to a transportation funding law that was enacted in 2017 called Senate Bill 1. The law instituted an initial increase to the gasoline excise tax, but it also established annual adjustments to the rate, so it kept up with inflation each year. And the law was passed to address declining revenues, but also to further support the maintenance, operation, and improvement of state and local transportation systems.
Talk a little bit about some of the trade-offs and replacement options if lawmakers were to step in and suspend this gas tax.
Yeah, so there are definitely trade-offs in providing relief to consumers and maintaining funding for transportation. The state could provide relief and operate with less revenues. However, that would ultimately mean less roadway projects being completed. The state could also look to backfill any lost revenues, either from the general fund or other state sources. However, that comes with the trade-off of having less funding available for other activities outside of transportation.
And what type of impact at the pump would this immediately have if the gas tax were suspended?
So a temporary relief measure would mean lower prices at the pump for consumers. The exact magnitude would depend on the size and the duration of the relief that's provided. So for example, a 1-month suspension of the gasoline excise tax, which is currently at 61.2 cents per gallon, that would largely be passed through to consumers through savings at the pump. However, this would result in roughly over $600 million in less revenue, which would impact state and local transportation agencies. This is a small amount in the grand scheme of the state's total transportation funding. However, in my example, the longer that relief is provided, the larger those impacts grow.
Do you see a long-term solution that would make the most sense from your perspective, from a nonpartisan point of view?
The state has many options over the long run to look at addressing high gasoline prices. However, all of these come with significant trade-offs that will need to be weighed by the state. For instance, the state could look at adjusting some of its environmental policies and regulations that impact gasoline prices. However, this does impact the state's ability to meet some of its environmental goals and objectives, such as reducing greenhouse gas emissions or improving air quality.
There's certainly a trade-off there. Frank Jimenez, Principal Fiscal and Policy Analyst in the Environment and Transportation section of California's Nonpartisan Legislative Analyst Office. Thank you so much for your time and your insights, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you.